I'm here at the U.S. Play Coalition's conference on the value of play at Clemson University in Clemson, South Carolina. And not only did I have the opportunity to attend and present at this groundbreaking conference on the state of children's play in the United States, but I also had the opportunity to speak with some of the world's leading experts on children's play and ask them their opinions about risk, challenge, and play in children's lives today.
Well, JC, I think it's very simple. You cannot send a child out at 18 into the world and expect them to suddenly flip a switch and know how to manage risk and how to manage themselves and navigate the world. So we have to provide children while they're growing up with metered opportunities, metered-guided opportunities to explore risk on their own, because it builds skill, it builds resilience. My ability to meet a challenge and then get through that challenge on my own builds resilience. You're telling me exactly how to get through that challenge, or even worse, removing it from my environment completely cannot build that skill. And to me, it's that simple.
When I was a child, the adults would tell us about the hazards that are around us, but they didn't make a big issue of it. Then they turned us loose to learn for ourselves, but they kept an eye out for what we were doing and where we were going. But they allowed us to pave our own way. We lived in the outskirts of the Washita National Forest, and we could go there and play into the woods. Never got lost. We were taught how to find our way home. We would go to the river swimming, even with the older boys, even before we could swim. And we did have to pull a guy out every now and then, but there were always good swimmers there. That was one of the rules. You always go with a good swimmer who looks out after you. And we played lots of games that would today be taboo and considered hazardous. They were rough, but we learn to protect ourselves. When children have opportunities to take risk, they learn to handle risk. And if they don't have such opportunities, they can become weak and fragile.
I think it's really important for every child to find their just right fits in a playground. So it's whether a child has varying abilities, in my mind, doesn't really matter. It's more a matter of making sure that there's places where they're comfortable, but then that there's the next steps, kind of from a developmental standpoint, of that sense that a child can have of conquering the next step. I found my just right place, but then there's this new thing I can reach for and I can strive for, and then that becomes the next thing to conquer in my world. So for that child who's maybe looking at wheeled mobility, maybe that's different textures of grades within the playground. For that child with autism, maybe it's having little nooks and crannies that invite me to get into bigger social engagement with other children. So it's really just thinking about developmentally how children grow and really have an excitement about conquering their world and making sure we have that within the world for them.
Oh, I think there are ways they can do it that would be very satisfying to the children and not overly scary to the adults. And one way is to have what are called loose parts available. So these can be natural things like stumps and tree parts, some stones and so on that children build with. It can be kind of found objects, big cardboard tubes and things like that, perhaps put away in a shed when they're not in use to protect them a little bit. And what children do with that is to enter freely into the world of play, develop their own ideas, and challenge themselves. It's not always physically challenging because doesn't involve high climbing necessarily, but it is challenging to their imaginations, to their social abilities, and they begin to take more risks in those realms. Then if the schools can also give them some higher platforms, deeper sand, something I really am in favor of because the little shallow sand pits are nice for the preschoolers and maybe kindergarten, but even they outgrow them. If you give children deep sand and shovels, they will go on playing, tunneling, digging, building for years. Access to water is, of course, ideal, but schools may not want to do that. They're not going to let children climb trees, but some climbing structures that the challenge. There's some nice adventuresome ones that I've been seeing photos of that, are safe because of the underground surfacing and the way they're constructed, but they do offer challenges. So children of different ages find themselves climbing to different heights, taking different levels of risk. So the thing to realize with children and risk is that they have good ways of self-assessment, of how far they can go, how high they can go, what's their comfort zone and what stretches it a little bit. There's not too many children I've known that are really foolhardy when it comes to risk. Sometimes if they haven't been allowed to take risks, they're not very good right at the beginning of risk assessing, but they become quite good, and they tend not to injure themselves at all, or very minor injuries. But I think children need risk. I think that's the thing for schools mainly to realize, that we are not preparing children to be able to risk assess in their life, and that leaves them in a very dangerous and vulnerable condition. It's like raising a pet has no sense of street traffic, and then you let them outdoors to play. It's really dangerous for them. And if children haven't grown up taking some risks and assessing risk, they don't know how to measure themselves against some of the real challenges and risks that will come into their life.
Right, I think that's a great question. I think first of all you have to look at the children that you're serving in that play area and what their unique needs are, or what their age group and ability level is. One of the things, without getting too broad, is that you have to look at different types of materials and different ways of encouraging variety of movements. For example, a number of different types of stepping pods and stepping forms that encourage kids to balance and coordinate their movements from one to the next to the next. So the adjacencies of those things, if you use different types of materials that have rigid elements as well as flexible elements, then it's going to require them to engage more of their muscles that they don't normally use in day-to-day activities, like their core muscles or their upper body. It's just a variety of movements and a variety of materials and textures, I think, add to that overall level of difficulty and challenge. And one of the things that we always talk about is appropriate levels of challenge and graduated levels of challenge, so that there's always an additional level of difficulty as that child matures and masters one level of challenge. There's another one just beyond at the next step up waiting for them, so that it keeps that play environment lively and challenging and invigorating for them over a period of time.
I don't think they've affected them negatively at all. I know many people might think otherwise. I think if it's affected them negatively, it's because the people who are using those guidelines are using them in ways to help their position by, like, removing play from their facilities to avoid the issues rather than deal with the issues. Regulations are there to keep kids safe, and I think they can do that very simply and easily without a lot of effort or funding. So I think we need to be protecting kids, and I think we've done a pretty good job in trying to do that.
Well, I think there's two things that parents need to do. One is, to the extent that they're concerned about their kids being outside without them, maybe being in danger of being taken by a stranger, they need to know the people in their neighborhood. They need to know the people who live around them. They need to be part of the community. So to go out, walk outside, meet the parents, meet the kids, have a relationship with them. And the other thing is, really, it comes from a Japanese word called kaizen, which means a gradual, continuous improvement. So with my son Marco, for instance, who's 6.5 years old now, we go to school every day, and I don't just say, okay, we ride our bikes to school. I don't say, just go ahead, I trust that you'll get there on your own. Every day I give him a little bit more freedom. I give him a little more ability to go on his own. So the first few days, the first few couple weeks actually, we went together. I went ahead of him, and then I let him go with me and go ahead sometimes. Now he's going ahead all the time, and I'm letting him take care of his own things and lock his own bike. I'm letting him put away his own gloves and helmet, and someday I'll let him go a few hundred yards ahead of me, and then I won't even be there anymore. But it's about continuous gradual improvement, not just doing it all at once.
Yeah, it seems to me, though it's largely anecdotal, that the parents in the US are very, very risk averse for their children. I think there's a lot of that in the UK as well, but there seems to be somehow more willingness to experience a bit of risk in the UK. I think that we have to be careful, and we have to start getting parents to see risk as a valuable opportunity. The longer we put kids in padded rooms to play and put rubber on the floor so that when they fall, they bounce back, and they certainly don't graze a knee, I think we're actually training our kids we're not equipping them to live in the real world. So I think it's very important that we do address that with parents. And it's very hard. As a parent, you see your child learning to walk and it falls splat on its face, and you go, "Oh, my darling, come on, pick yourself up." And very often, just let the child get up on its own, and it will be fine. It's your shock that startles them very often. So I think it's a hard thing to do. It's okay. Here's an example. My daughter, from the age of 8, has been doing trapeze. And she's quite a good static trapeze artist now, and she performs on silks and on hoops, and she's good. But in the early stages, it was very hard to watch her learning to swing around a bar and perform aerial gymnastics way up high above my head. But if I'd stopped her, it would have stopped her from doing something amazing with her life. So I think we have to be very mindful of separating our own fears from the real risks that our children take.
Actually, that's a very interesting question. Children, when they're really engaged in something that I guess is their pursuit for their most important thing, they're going to go after whatever that is. And the designer needs to understand the child's needs and get that information obviously through the child input, but setting up the environment to really fulfill that function. Now, if it's the application where it becomes a built environment, providing opportunities to have a vista or be up high, get a different perspective on the world is one way of doing it. Having a varied level of activities for different gross and fine motor development. But then there's also kind of a balance with the natural environment too, because oftentimes you see children really immersing themselves again in that sort of in the zone or flow or pure play of being in the moment. And you know what, leaving the children up to their own devices, they'll go ahead and take those risks that they need to fulfill whatever is the most important thing to satisfy their thirst for play. So I guess I would say flexibility and understanding child development is where the advice I would give for designers to incorporate risk without the negative implications into an environment.
The best thing we can do for kids today is to let them play. And the best thing that we can do for children's play is to allow them to experience developmentally appropriate risk and challenges. These developmental moments that will occur when children are allowed to take risk and challenges will eventually shape them into healthy, happy, and creative adults. So, what are the 4 keys to success to allowing children to experience risk and challenge on the playground? Well, first, provide them with ample time for free play. 2, create atmospheres and experiences that allow for risk-taking during play. 3, allow for more independence and room to roam as they age and grow older. And 4, most of all, allow them to fail.